The Honno-ji Incident is completely different from the common theory, just before the great achievement of unifying the country. Oda Nobunaga was struck down halfway through his dream. He was the man closest to unification at the time. In the Honno-ji Incident, Oda Nobunaga was suddenly killed due to the betrayal of his own retainer, Akechi Mitsuhide. You would think Akechi Mitsuhide would then become the ruler, but Mitsuhide's reign ended in just 3 days. In the end, Akechi Mitsuhide could not become the ruler. So causing the incident was just a loss for him, wasn't it? Actually, the person who benefited most was Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Of course, Toyotomi Hideyoshi had talent himself. But without the Honno-ji Incident, Toyotomi Hideyoshi would never have risen this far. Above all, Akechi Mitsuhide gained nothing, despite causing the incident. Isn't that strange? The reason why Akechi Mitsuhide caused the Honno-ji Incident is not clear either. For what purpose did he do it? Why did the Honno-ji Incident happen? On June 2nd, Tensho 10, Oda Nobunaga was staying at Honno-ji Temple. Akechi Mitsuhide fired arrows at him. At that time, Oda Nobunaga was staying at Honno-ji with only about 60 men. In contrast, Akechi Mitsuhide was moving with a force of over 10,000 men. So in a sense, it was natural that he won. Indeed, Oda Nobunaga was killed due to that overwhelming difference in military power. However, Akechi Mitsuhide and Oda Nobunaga had a master-servant relationship, and Mitsuhide had advanced significantly under Nobunaga. He wasn't always treated badly. Originally, he is said to have served Saito Dosen of Mino. After that, he served the Asakura clan and served the shogun, moving between many workplaces. Also, regarding Akechi Mitsuhide himself, his origins are not clear. However, Oda Nobunaga's lawful wife Nohime was the daughter of Saito Dosen, whom Mitsuhide originally served. It is said that she and Mitsuhide were cousins. If that is true, it is thought that he came from a decent background. Somehow Mitsuhide ended up with Oda Nobunaga, although he was a job changer. He had much education and connections from working in various places, and because he was related to the lawful wife, he came to be deeply trusted by Oda Nobunaga because of his history serving the shogun. Akechi Mitsuhide had wide connections with cultural figures and the imperial court. He was a reassuring presence for Oda Nobunaga in building relationships with the court. In fact, despite being an outsider, he was able to become the lord of Sakamoto Castle, surpassing hereditary retainers. Akechi Mitsuhide was the first among Nobunaga's retainers to become a lord of a castle. So there is no mistake that he received considerable favor. Therefore, based on his work, he should have received sufficient rewards. If so, why did he cause the Honno-ji Incident? Generally, it is said that he received repeated reprimands from Oda Nobunaga. It is said Nobunaga called Mitsuhide a kumquat head in public. Kumquat head apparently meant bald, but even subtracting that, Mitsuhide was valued. If Oda Nobunaga became the ruler as he was, as the most powerful retainer, he would undoubtedly have received favorable treatment. Also, the problem of being overworked is also raised. In fact, Mitsuhide collapsed from overwork. However, since Mitsuhide was an outsider, if he didn't achieve results, he couldn't gain trust within the clan. If he knew that once Nobunaga achieved unification, he would receive decent treatment, why take the risk? to kill Oda Nobunaga. Actually, there was a mastermind. Even if Mitsuhide himself wanted to rule, Oda Nobunaga hadn't completely unified the country yet. There were still many challenges. And it is said, he was getting old, and the era of life lasts 50 years. Mitsuhide was already past his prime, trying to unify the country now. Seems a bit unreasonable, doesn't it? However, if someone was cooperating with and he would give them a share, or if someone more powerful than Oda Nobunaga ordered this rebellion, the most likely mastermind is Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Actually, after this Honno-ji Incident, the one who benefited most was Toyotomi Hideyoshi. At the time, he was attacking the Mori clan in Chu. Although he was at a distance where he couldn't easily return, he returned at amazing speed, defeated Akechi Mitsuhide, and brilliantly won the position of Oda Nobunaga's successor. Actually, Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Akechi Mitsuhide shared the fact that neither were hereditary retainers. If Oda Nobunaga became the ruler and prioritized hereditary retainers, the positions of Akechi Mitsuhide and Toyotomi Hideyoshi would become precarious. To begin with, was ordered by Nobunaga to go support Hideyoshi if he knew Hideyoshi would betray return. Preparations for his return could have been made from the start. With that in mind, he could have negotiated with Mitsuhide behind the scenes. Next, actually, Tokugawa Ieyasu. It is also rumored to be a mastermind. Oda Nobunaga and Tokugawa Ieyasu had a good relationship. But for Nobunaga, who had destroyed the Takeda clan, Ieyasu might have lost his utility. There is such a theory. Tokugawa Ieyasu also held a grudge against Oda Nobunaga because he was forced to accept the deaths of his wife and son. However, Tokugawa Ieyasu was near Kyoto with only a few men when the incident occurred. Sensing danger, he panicked and fled for his life. If he were the mastermind, he would have arranged to return home without such hardship. And actually, there is a view that the hidden mastermind was the imperial court faction. Oda Nobunaga was a revolutionary person, for better or worse, so he was not bound by old thinking. In other words, he was a man who would destroy old powers without hesitation. Moreover, Oda Nobunaga allegedly planned to welcome the emperor to the top of Azuchi Castle. The imperial court faction undoubtedly did not feel good about this. Akechi Mitsuhide originally had deep ties with the court, so it wouldn't be strange if they conspired behind the scenes. Also, there is another person in the Oda clan whose movements were unclear. Oda Nobunaga's lawful wife Nohime, her end is not clear. It is not even known if she was alive at the time of the Honno-ji Incident. Even though she was the lawful wife, Nohime had no children with Nobunaga, so her position in the family was precarious. There might be a what-if scenario there. The mysterious head of Oda Nobunaga. In the end, Akechi Mitsuhide was treated as a traitor and gained nothing. This was partly because Hideyoshi returned from the attack unexpectedly. But the fact that he couldn't find Oda Nobunaga's head was also significant. At that time, to announce to the public that he had killed Nobunaga, the head was necessary as evidence. Oda Nobunaga knew this too. Handing it over to Mitsuhide would be more humiliating than death. He must have known that without the head, the legitimacy of the rebellion would be vague. Therefore, Nobunaga could not afford to hand over his head. Knowing he couldn't win, his last resistance was to cut off his head early and have it carried out of Honno-ji. In fact, there is a burial mound for Nobunaga's head at a temple in Shizuoka. It is said that a retainer entrusted the head to a monk who was close to Nobunaga. Also, at that time, monks were considered separate from the secular world. So it is said they might have been able to sneak into Honno. However, for Akechi Mitsuhide, the head was absolutely necessary to justify himself. So even if it was a monk, he wouldn't easily let an outsider in. In the end, Oda Nobunaga's head was never found, a funeral was held, and Akechi was killed by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, ending his glory in an instant. It remains unknown why Akechi Mitsuhide caused the Honno-ji Incident.